Welcome to Boring Historian. Tonight, we'll be exploring the end of the Golden Age of Piracy. If you enjoy our videos, please comment below on what other history topics you'd like us to explore, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss one of our daily releases. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and let me guide you into a time and place you'll want to sleep through but also never forget. Imagine the muffled creak of a heavy timber deck at dawn. Salt-soaked ropes dripped with morning mist, and the faint tang of gunpowder still lingers in your nostrils from last night's skirmish. A rank of grim-faced sailors stands silent, eyes fixed on the horizon where a black-hulled warship looms, her cannons a cruel promise. You taste brine on your tongue and hear the distant call of gulls circling wreckage-strewn atolls. This is no romantic seafaring romance. It's the final breath of a world built on stolen gold and unruly freedom. In tonight's tale, we'll drift into those fog-choked waters and witness how navies, law, and fear slowly strangled the era of pirates until legend was all that remained. The Pirate Code, a life of rules and rebellion, the unwritten laws of the sea. Beneath the sun's relentless gaze, the pirate ship swayed gently on the vast expanse of the ocean. The crew, a tapestry of hardened souls, moved with purpose. Their lives governed not by the distant monarchs of empires, but by the immediate, unspoken laws of the sea. These were the Pirate Articles agreements, forged not in royal courts, but in the salt-streaked cabins of ships, where survival and order were paramount. Unlike the rigid hierarchies of naval fleets, pirate ships operated on a more egalitarian system. Each crew member had a voice, a vote in matters of consequence. The captain, though a figure of authority, was not a monarch. His power was circumscribed by the collective will of the crew. This system was designed to prevent the tyranny that many had fled from in their previous lives, whether aboard merchant vessels or under oppressive regimes. The articles covered a myriad of aspects, from the division of plunder to the conduct expected of each pirate. Gambling, for instance, was often prohibited to prevent disputes over winnings. Fighting among crew members was discouraged, as internal strife could jeopardize the unity essential for survival. Even the presence of women aboard was regulated, with some codes stipulating severe punishments for those who brought women onto the ship without consent. These codes were not mere suggestions. They were binding contracts. Violations were met with swift and often brutal consequences. Desertion during battle could result in marooning or death. Theft was punishable by death, and even minor infractions could lead to severe corporal punishment. In this environment, the Pirate Code was more than a set of rules. It was the lifeblood of the crew's existence. It ensured fairness, maintained order, and above all, kept the specter of mutiny at bay. For in the unforgiving world of piracy, the greatest threat was not the navy or the merchant ships, but the disintegration of the crew's unity. When the code is broken aboard the pirate ship, the articles were not mere suggestions. They were the backbone of the crew's existence. To violate them was to jeopardize the delicate balance that kept the ship sailing smoothly. Punishments for transgressions were swift and often brutal, serving as stark reminders of the code's importance. One of the most severe offenses was desertion during battle. Pirates depended on each other for survival, and fleeing in the heat of combat was considered a betrayal. Such an act could result in marooning, being abandoned on a desolate island, or execution, depending on the captain's judgment and the gravity of the desertion. Disputes among crew members were another source of tension. While minor quarrels might be settled with a stern reprimand, more serious altercations could lead to marooning or even death. The Pirate Code emphasized the importance of unity and discipline, and any action that threatened this cohesion was dealt with harshly. Theft from the crew's shared loot was also a grave offense. Pirates operated on a system of shared rewards, where each member received a portion of the spoils. Stealing from this communal treasure was seen as a direct attack on the collective, and the punishment was often death or marooning. Even minor infractions could lead to severe consequences. For example, gambling was often prohibited to prevent disputes over winnings. Similarly, the presence of women aboard was strictly regulated. Bringing a woman onto the ship without permission could result in death. These strict punishments underscored the pirates' commitment to their code. While their lifestyle was one of freedom and rebellion, it was also one of order and discipline. The pirate code was not just a set of rules. It was a social contract that bound the crew together, ensuring their survival and success on the high seas. The price of disobedience, the pirate code was a strict set of rules that governed the behavior of the crew. Violating these articles was considered a serious offense and was met with harsh punishments. The severity of the punishment often depended on the nature of the transgression and discretion of the captain and quartermaster. One of the most feared punishments was marooning. This involved abandoning the offender on a deserted island with minimal provisions, often just a bottle of rum, a pistol, and a small amount of gunpowder. The intent was clear, to leave the individual stranded with little chance of survival. Marooning was typically reserved for serious offenses such as desertion during battle or theft from fellow pirates. Another common form of punishment was flogging. Pirates would be lashed with a cato 9 tails, a whip with 9 knotted cords, which could cause severe injury and lasting scars. Flogging was often used for offenses like fighting among the crew or gambling, which could lead to disputes. In some cases, pirates who committed theft were subjected to mutilation. This could involve slitting the ears or nose of the guilty party, marking them as a thief, and serving as a deterrent to others. Such punishments were intended to maintain order and discipline aboard the ship. The pirate code also addressed issues like the presence of women aboard the ship. Bringing a woman on board without permission was considered a serious breach of conduct and could result in death. This strict rule was enforced to prevent potential distractions and conflicts among the crew. These severe punishments underscore the importance pirates placed on maintaining order and discipline. While their lifestyle was one of rebellion and freedom, it was also one of strict codes and harsh consequences for those who broke them. The captain's response, the crescendo of rebellion, is met with a flash of steel and the captain's steely gaze. In the dim light of the quarterdeck, the captain steps forward not as a tyrant, but as the chosen executor of the crew's will. His voice is low and measured, yet heavy with authority, the living embodiment of the articles they all signed. He addresses the crew, reminding them of the pact they made, that every man's vote and honor matters, but so does loyalty and order. Those who cheat, desert, or sow discord have broken their contract not just with him, but with every man aboard. The captain's words are sharp, cutting through the tension like a corsair's plague. Punishment is not arbitrary. It's prescribed. The captain lays out the fate that awaits the offender, marooning on a barren isle with only a pistol, a little water, a pinch of gunpowder. They will be made governor of an island alone with death waiting from thirst, hunger, or despair. The crew listens, the silence thick and oppressive, each man's fate intertwined with their choice tonight. To desert and battle means betrayal of every brother beside you. To steal from the common chest is to undo the fragile trust that holds this floating republic together. The captain's glare sweeps the deck, catching the eyes of every man, reminding them that the articles are not mere ink. They are the rules that keep the ship from becoming a chaos of violence. Within this framework of discipline, the captain also knows mercy and fairness. He reminds the crew of the compensation scheme. Losing a limb in service is met not with scorn, but with gold from their shared bounty. Each punishment complements a promise: equal share, equal voice, and equitable care. This balanced justice fuels loyalty and ensures that even in suffering, the crew remains united. Finally, the captain signals the quartermaster. The offender, if found, will be brought before the crew at dawn. The resolution will come by vote, quiet execution of justice under the sun, or a silent departure aboard a small boat headed for exile. This is how a pirate ship maintains discipline, through democratic punishment, swift execution, and the unspoken understanding that to join the crew is to live by these rules. The captain returns to his post, the tension lifting like morning fog. In that moment, the code has done its work, order maintained, unity restored, and the bright horizon of their pirate life secure once more. The captain's authority confirmed, In the aftermath of discipline, the captain stands as the living embodiment of the crew's collective will. On deck at dawn, the crew assembles in a loose semicircle, boots scraped on timber, eyes rimmed by the night's watch, voices hushed with anticipation. The captain steps forward, posture measured, gaze steady. This moment isn't about fear or domination, it's about reaffirming the contract they all signed. Every pirate aboard holds a vote of confidence in the captain. No matter how fierce the storm or how bleak the horizon, the crew must feel that their leader earned their loyalty. At this dawn council, the captain stands not above the crew, but among them his authority conditional and renewed by their acceptance. He opens the floor. Is the captain fit to steer the ship? The quartermaster, seated at his side, nods once. The crew murmurs assent, or murmurs challenge. If enough voices rise against the captain, perhaps frustrated by rash decisions or failures, the crew may call for a deposing vote. In that case, the captain must either step down or regain the crew's faith in his leadership. But if the crew stands with him, the captain's authority is reaffirmed, and only then does he fully reclaim command. With that, the quartermaster administers a symbol of unity, the barrel of fresh water shared among all hands, a silent toast to loyalty and renewed order. The crew then disperses to duty, their ship humming with renewed purpose, discipline upheld, trust confirmed, command restored. This simple vote of confidence, repeated regularly, ensured that the pirate captain was both respected and restrained. His power was limited, his authority conditional, and his survival at the helm entirely dependent on the crew's collective trust. That fragile democracy kept rebellion from erupting anew and kept the ship afloat together. The act of mutiny, rebellion on the high seas, planning the uprising. In the cramped dimness below deck, pirate crews gathered in hushed knots shadows leaning close, eyes darting in the lantern glow. Planning a mutiny wasn't a matter of heated emotion. It was a calculated conspiracy. Each man weighed risk. Success meant freedom, power, a shot at the captain's quarter. But failure meant bone treatment, or worse. Mutiny talk always began with grievance, unfair shares, brutal discipline, cowardice at sea. These complaints were not casual. They were strategic signals passed quietly between trusted mates. Pirate ships often operated under articles of agreement, which codified justice, discipline, and expectations in near democratic fashion. And it was within these same articles that the seeds of rebellion could take root. A core group would form, the ringleaders chosen for their loyalty, their strength, their charisma. They met at midnight, in the forecastle, in the shadow of the barrel stacks, or behind the low-slung galley. They spoke in code. We sail west at dawn. The watch changes on the 3rd. These whispers slipped past the quartermaster's ears, most likely drowned by creaks of wood and ocean sigh. Communication was deliberate and precise. They used nods, shared glances, and trusted channels. If the captain's coin purse was seen jangling too often, or if he bunkered swill that should have been for the crew, grumble might turn into a plan. Sometimes, mutinies erupted with no more warning than a sudden lash of steel across the deck. Successful conspirators counted votes covertly, sometimes written marks on cabin walls, sometimes shallow cup of rum pledges. They needed just over half the crew. Without consensus, a mutiny would collapse before the first dagger struck. And then came the trigger, perhaps a brutal flogging, a failed heist, or news of an approaching naval man of war. That moment crystallized the plan. They moved as one. Weapons were hidden beneath hammocks. Officers were quietly bound. The hatch was barred. In one sudden snap, the conspiracy broke into action, and the ship, once ordered by a single captain, became a powder keg ready to explode. Planning a mutiny was a high-stakes gamble. It took patience, trust, secrecy, and cold resolve. And when it finally unfolded, there was no turning back. The moment of betrayal, the lantern-lit deck, is thick with tension as the plan's momentum sweeps through the crew. It's midnight, the hour when shadows deepen and whispers hold power. Flintlock pistols are hidden beneath hammocks, and daggers nestle in coat folds. A hush falls as conspirators move in silence. eyes locked on their targets officers trusted until now. At the appointed moment, a signal, a tap against the mast, a low whistle, a snap of halyard sets it all in motion. The would-be mutineers surge, wrestling the captain and loyalists into submission. It's swift and ruthless. The quartermaster's cutlass flicks. A pistol clicks to life, and shouts echo across the deck as men plead and are cut down. Chaos becomes order as the captain is bound in heavy rope, pulled roughly to the mainmast. He glares as the mutineers drag him down, his authority literally tied. Loyalists are disarmed or locked below deck. Guns are cleared, sails checked, rigging secured, all tasks done with grim precision. The ship's course shifts. Amid the clamor, a new voice rises, the ringleader's voice. He demands the others pledge allegiance to the new order. Slips of paper are passed in lantern glow. Who stands with us? Enough hands incline? The first vote, quiet but irrevocable, confirms their rebellion. Suddenly, the ship doesn't creak with its old life. It pulses with a new heartbeat. Rope rattles. Rusted iron glints. Men hunt down any remaining dissenters. The betrayers become the new rulers, their power sealed by violence, by fear, and by the silent acquiescence of the crew. As the first hour of the mutiny passes, the mutineers focus on damage control. They secure the captain's belongings, his coat, his logbook, even his compass. They purge the officers' cabins, purge any evidence of the old regime. Above deck, the watch changes. Sailors move like unsteady dancers as they lower the pirate colors and hoist the new flag. The ship's name may even be changed. A freshly painted hull, a different crest, something to erase the past and signal a new epoch. By dawn, the mutiny has seeped into every plank and rope of the vessel. The crew, once bound to the fallen captain's will, now share a dangerous solidarity. But the taste of betrayal lingers like salt on a wound, and every glance, every step, carries the threat of collapse. The moment of betrayal has passed, but the true test of unity lies ahead. Seizing control, once the deed is done, the mutineers must act fast. Control isn't just taken, it's secured. The ship, newly claimed, thrums with nervous energy as conspirators scramble to consolidate power and reconfigure every part of life at sea. Below deck, the ringleader moves through the mess hall, collecting the captain's belongings. His coat, his logbook, compass. These are symbols to be repurposed or destroyed. The captain's quarters are sealed with crude locks or nailed panels, erasing the physical domains of authority. On deck, a section of men work to haul down the old Jolly Roger, ripping it from its halyard. A blank white flag is often hoisted in its place until a new standard, perhaps a black flag with a grim emblem, is chosen. It's a ritual of ownership, a declaration to the world that the ship answers to new hands now. The vessel's name may be hastily repainted. Royal Rover now becomes fancy. Revenge, or any name that echoes the crew's ambitions or victories, further severing ties to the old command. Every corner of the ship is swept for loyalty or dissent. Crewmen who hesitated in the heat of mutiny or showed loyalty to the old captain are given tasks at the rail or banished below deck. Some are forced to swear fresh oaths under the gun of a flintlock or the edge of a blade. The quartermaster steps forward as the new arbiter of the crew's fortunes. His authority, second only to the captain's, is reaffirmed by the new regime. He inventories weapons, rations, and supplies, ensuring no cashiers remain loyal to the old structure. Locks are changed. Hidden magazines are discovered. Control of food, booze, arms all pivot to this moment. Training begins immediately. Men, once bound by a code, must now learn new watch rotations and lines of command. Fights over who will steer, who mans the lookout, who manages navigation, each is resolved by a vote or muscle. Unity is fragile, but necessary. Above all, communication changes. The crow's nest watch, once tasked with spotting prizes, is reoriented toward the horizon for naval sails. Any sign of pursuit. The helmman is told to avoid known shipping lanes patrolled by the king's ships. Finally, the mutineers cement control with a vote of acceptance. All hands secure this chain of command. If the majority nod, loyalty is formalized. If not, dissenters may be marooned, flogged, or worse. By the time dawn paints the sky, the ship has a new heartbeat. The mutiny is no longer an event, it is a new reality, established through ritual, regulation, and ruthless efficiency. Securing the vessel is their blood price, and the first test of whether their rebellion will survive the sea's unyielding tests or crumble under its weight. New regime morning breaks over a ship that no longer feels familiar. The mutiny has reshaped every plank and sail. Now comes the hard work of transformation. The new regime rises slowly, with authority redefined and hierarchy reshuffled beneath the salt wind. Below deck, the former captain's cabin is stripped ornate maps, folded flags, his compass and quills taken and locked away or handed out to the new lieutenants. Crew members haul down his personal items and drape them across the mess deck. A ritual tableau showing the power has shifted. On deck, new leaders emerge ringleaders, receive sashes or insignia taken from the fallen captain, flaunted as badges of authority. One steps forward and reads aloud a revised set of pirate articles. It's no mere ceremony. It's law, binding each man to the new order. We sail for profit, not tyranny, he declares, underlining that the only freedom is survival and unity. The quartermaster, often the most powerful officer after the captain, conducts an inventory counting weapons, powder, food, and water. Hidden stashes are included or confiscated. Any weapons dedicated to the old captain are surrendered or repealed. Each piece of gear now belongs to the crew, and every man receives a share. Watches are reorganized. The old captain's loyalists are shunted to the bow or relegated to night tasks. Any reluctance is punished not with violence, but with cold silence. They find themselves alone, stiffened by review and reassignments. Loyalty is covertly tested. Who first smiles, who still hesitates. Voice and vote remain essential. Before a dozen hogsheads of rum are tapped, the crew calls for a vote on the new leadership. Silently, they reaffirm those in power or decide to replace them on the spot. Even the newly crowned ringleaders understand that their rule depends entirely on trust, fragile as spider silk. As the sun climbs, they raise the new flag, perhaps a fearsome black banner or a white flag until they agree on a design. Cabin boys run between masts, tying halyards, whispering. The ship shudders as sails shift under unfamiliar hands. Above the bustle, the crow's nest lookout scans for threats. No longer are they hunting merchantmen, they're hunted themselves. Naval ships, rumor mongers, privateers, and you could spell doom. The lookout's kisses alert, eyes sharpen, guns are wiped down, sails reefed. By midday, the ship hums with the new routine. Cooks ladle soup into mess bowls, the carpenter busy repairing boards. Deckhands swab the decks under watchful eyes. Every hammered nail, every stowed barrel is a brick in the new regime's foundation. Mutiny is not complete until order is restored under it. This is the test. Can they govern themselves now? Will unity survive the inevitable storm, the next raid, the next betrayal? The ship moves forward, changed. The old captain's legacy still echoes, his cabin sealed, his belongings scattered, but the new regime stands firm, backed by freshly bound articles, reinforced loyalty, and the unspoken terror of what happens when that trust fractures. New order tested morning light glints off the waves as the newly minted crew braces for their first true test. The mutiny has been won, but the real battle lies in holding it together. It's time for their authority, fragile as it may be, to be pressed into the crucible of hardship. Below deck, the quartermaster stands over barrels of rum and food, noting how much remains after the night's raucous toast. Supplies are low. Every ration, every dram of alcohol must be tracked. Any miscalculation here could spark discontent. Crewmen whisper, one eye on the stores, another on the nearby horizon. When food becomes scarce, unity frays. On deck, the lookout calls out distant sails. Adrenaline surges. This is their chance, or their folly. They must decide. Ambush a merchant ship and risk naval retaliation, or avoid confrontation and let supplies dwindle. The decision is made by vote, another echo of the pirate articles. A division of hands signals readiness for attack. The new captain nods, authority affirmed. Cannons are readied. Muskets rest over shoulders. The ship's pulse quickens. Waves batter the hull. Every man stands ready, not out of loyalty, but fear of failure, fear of betrayal, fear of the cold noose that awaits mutineers who lose their nerve. The raid commences, the boarding ladder clangs, blood spills, screams echo. For a moment, the ship is alive again, fueled by purpose and greed. They return triumphant, chests full of loot and morale, high proof that their rebellion can yield success. But jubilation fades. Sweet wine sours when a storm hits at dusk. Sail tearing, sails flashing, water heaving through the hatches. Under old leadership, the crew knew the drill. Under new, confusion reigns. Watch orders overlap, commands clash. The ship groans, a mast cracks, a man falls overboard. Panic edges in. In the storm's heart, they rally. The ringleader emerges, taking charge where the old captain would have. He barks orders, men scramble, lines are secured, sails are reefed. They survive. But they survive together, not by title, but by will. By dawn, battered but intact, the crew stands on deck in silence. They've earned unity in a crucible of disorder. The mutiny's meaning lies not in overthrowing a leader, but in passing this test supplies managed, a raid won, a storm weathered. Only then is the new order truly affirmed. They haul in lines, hoist the black flag, and sail on rebels who learn that leadership is not seized in violence, but earned in trial. Marooning, the ultimate punishment understanding. Marooning picture a remote speck of land, no trees. No towns, no hope of rescue. This is where the pirate code met its cruelest sanction. Marooning. Unlike a swift hanging or a chaotic flogging, marooning was a punishment that lingered, stretching men between life and death in a slow, psychological torment. Marooning wasn't a legal execution. It was a sentence delivered by the crew, sanctioned by their own articles. Pirates referred to it as promoting someone to be governor of an island. But it was no honor, it was exile crafted to break the soul. The condemned were abandoned with minimal supplies, often just a pistol loaded with a single bullet, a small container of water, sometimes a touch of food or rum. They weren't given tools to survive. They were set adrift in isolation, left to choose their own demise. This practice stemmed from the deeply held pirate belief in equity and accountability. If a man betrayed the crew through theft, desertion, or cowardice, he'd lost his right to their communal protection. To maroon him was to strip him bare physically and socially exile as justice and retribution in one bleak act. More than death, it was the terror of unending solitude. A man could look out at the endless sea and wonder, is anyone coming? The ocean was both prison wall and executioner. Time dripped like water through his fingers, each day another test of will, each shadow another reminder that rescue wasn't guaranteed. For most marooned men, this punishment served as both a brutal deterrent and a festering memory among the crew. It was poetry of cruelty, loneliness, sharpened by choice, despair wrapped in survival. To be marooned was to live a death in slow motion, and the threat of it kept pirates in line. The process of abandonment. The condemned man is led to the ship's longboat, his hands bound, his fate sealed. The crew watches silently, some with pity, others with indifference. The boat is lowered into the water, creaking under the weight of its grim cargo. As it drifts away from the ship, the man looks back one last time. The vessel that had been his home now a distant silhouette against the horizon. The longboat approaches the shore of a desolate island, its sands stretching endlessly under the harsh sun. The captain or quartermaster stands at the bow, a pistol in hand, ready to enforce the sentence. The marooned man is unceremoniously dumped onto the beach, his belongings, if any, scattered around him. A small bag of provisions, perhaps a bottle of water, a loaf of stale bread, and a single-shot pistol, loaded with one bullet. The message is clear. Survive if you can, but death is often the more merciful option. The boat pulls away, the oars dipping silently into the water, leaving the man alone on the shore. The sound of the oars fades, replaced by the relentless crash of waves against the sand. The island is silent, save for the occasional cry of a distant seabird. There is no sign of life, no hope of rescue. Just the vast expanse of ocean stretching out in every direction. The man stands there for a moment, Disoriented, his mind racing, he surveys his surroundings, the barren landscape, the lack of shelter, the absence of fresh water. Panic begins to set in. The reality of his situation sinks. He is alone, abandoned, with no way to escape. As the hours pass, the heat becomes unbearable. The sun beats down relentlessly, and the man begins to feel the effects of dehydration. His throat is dry, his lips cracked. He searches the island for any source of water, but finds none. His stomach growls with hunger, but there is nothing to eat. The provisions he was given are meager, barely enough to sustain him for a day. Night falls, and the temperature drops. The man huddles on the cold sand, shivering, his body aching from the day's exertions. He tries to sleep, but the sounds of the night, the rustling of unseen creatures, the crash of waves keep him awake. His mind races with thoughts of escape, of rescue, but deep down, he knows the truth. He is alone, and survival is uncertain. In the days that follow, the man struggles to find food and water. He becomes weak, his body deteriorating from the lack of sustenance. His hope fades with each passing day. The island, once a place of potential refuge, has become his prison. The provisions he was given are long gone, and the pistol remains untouched, a grim reminder of the fate that awaits those who cannot survive. Marooning was not just a punishment, it was a sentence to a slow, agonizing death. It was a method used by pirates to rid themselves of unwanted crew members, a way to enforce discipline through fear. The process was deliberate, designed to strip the condemned of their humanity and leave them to face nature's wrath alone. It was a punishment. It was a sentence to a slow, agonizing death. The odds of survival were slim, and for most, the end came swiftly. The marooned were often left with minimal provisions. A pistol with a single shot, a small flask of water, perhaps a loaf of stale bread. These meager supplies were not meant to sustain life, but to offer a final choice. The pistol, loaded with one bullet, served as a grim reminder that death was always an option. Without tools, shelter, or knowledge of the island's resources, survival was a matter of chance. The island environment, its flora, fauna, and climate played a significant role. Some islands offered fresh water and edible plants. Others were barren, offering nothing but sun-scorched earth and the relentless crash of waves. The psychological toll was as deadly as the physical. Isolation, hunger, and the constant threat of death eroded the mind. Time became an enemy, stretching endlessly as the marooned awaited rescue that might never come. Historical accounts are scarce, but those that exist tell of desperate struggles. Alexander Selkirk, marooned on Juan Fernandez Island, survived for 4 years by hunting goats and fishing. His story, though remarkable, was the exception. Most marooned men did not have the skills or luck to endure. In many cases, the marooned were never seen again. Their fate was sealed not by the elements alone, but by the isolation and despair that accompanied it. Marooning was a punishment designed not just to end life, but to strip away hope, leaving only the raw struggle for survival. Historical cases, marooning was not just a theoretical punishment. It was a grim reality for many sailors and pirates during the Golden Age of Piracy. The following accounts highlight the brutal nature of this practice and the varying fates of those subjected to it. Alexander Selkirk. Perhaps the most famous marooning was that of Alexander Selkirk, a Scottish sailor who was left on Juan Fernandez Island off the coast of Chile. Selkirk had expressed concerns about the seaworthiness of his ship, the Cinque Ports, and after a heated argument with the captain, he was abandoned on the island. Remarkably, Selkirk survived for 4 years by hunting goats and fishing. His ordeal inspired Daniel Defoe's novel Robinson Crusoe. Edward England. Pirate Edward England's marooning occurred after a conflict with his crew. Following a violent confrontation with James McCrae near the Comoros Islands, England and his crew hid on an island for 10 days. Upon agreeing to a peace deal with McCrae, England was voted out as captain and marooned on the island of Mauritius. After 4 months, he and a loyal crewman managed to build a boat and sail to a pirate haven in Madagascar. England died sometime in the winter of 1720 to 21, possibly from tropical disease. Leendert Hassenbosch, a Dutch sailor, was marooned on Ascension Island in 1725 as punishment for sodomy. He was left with a tent, some provisions, and a diary. His diary, discovered in 1726, provides a haunting account of his final days. It is believed that Hassenbosch died of thirst later that year. Robert Jeffrey. In 1807, Captain Warwick Lake of the Royal Navy marooned an impressed seaman, Robert Jeffrey, on Sombrero Island. Jeffrey was left with minimal supplies. 8 days later, he was rescued by the American schooner Adams from Marblehead, Massachusetts. Captain Lake was court-martialed and dismissed from the Royal Navy for his actions. Charles Vane. Pirate Charles Vane's marooning occurred after he was voted out as captain by his crew. He was abandoned on the island of New Providence in the Bahamas. Vane's fate after marooning is uncertain, but he was eventually captured and hanged in 1721. These historical cases illustrate the harsh reality of marooning and its role in maintaining discipline among pirate crews. The practice was a testament to the brutal enforcement of pirate codes and the unforgiving nature of the sea. The psychological toll marooning was not just a physical sentence, it was a psychological crucible. The isolation, the uncertainty, the relentless passage of time all conspired to erode the mind. Imagine the first night alone. The stars above, the endless ocean around, and the haunting silence. No voices, no sounds of footsteps, no creak of the ship's timbers. It's the wind and the waves. The mind begins to play tricks. Shadows become figures. The rustling of leaves turns into whispers. Time stretches, each minute feeling like an eternity. Days blur into one another. The sun rises and sets, but each day feels the same. Hunger gnaws at the stomach, thirst dries the throat, and fatigue weighs down the body. But it's the mind that suffers the most. The isolation breeds paranoia. Every sound is a threat. Every movement is a potential danger. The mind races, searching for patterns, for meaning in a world that offers none. Sleep becomes elusive. The body aches for rest, but the mind is too alert, too anxious. Nightmares creep into the darkness, vivid and terrifying. The line between dream and reality blurs. Hallucinations become common. Faces appear in the sand, voices echo in the wind. The mind, deprived of human contact, begins to fracture. The marooned man clings to memories, faces of loved ones, the sound of familiar voices, the warmth of human touch. But these memories begin to fade, replaced by the harsh reality of solitude. Despair sets in. The will to survive weakens. The pistol, once a symbol of hope, now becomes a symbol of escape. Some choose the pistol, others choose to endure. But for most, the end is the same. The mind succumbs to the isolation. The body gives in to the elements. And the island, once a place of potential refuge, becomes a tomb. Marooning was not just a punishment. It was a sentence to madness. A test of the human spirit, where the mind was the first casualty. It was a reminder that isolation can be more lethal than any blade, more enduring than any wound. Life aboard a pirate ship, a dangerous existence, daily routines, and hardships. Life aboard a pirate ship during the Golden Age of Piracy was far from the romanticized adventures often depicted in popular media. Instead, it was a grueling existence marked by peril, discomfort, and relentless monotony. Pirates, often former sailors from the Royal Navy or merchant ships, sought freedom and fortune on the high seas. But they found themselves enduring hardships that tested their physical endurance and mental resilience. Daily schedule and duties. Pirate ships operated on a strict schedule to maintain order and efficiency. The day was divided into 4-hour watches, with crew members assigned to specific shifts to ensure the ship was constantly manned. During these watches, pirates performed various duties, including steering the ship, keeping lookout for other vessels, and maintaining the sails. Off-duty periods were often spent resting, engaging in card games, or socializing. But the constant threat of attack kept everyone alert. The captain, elected by the crew, had authority over navigation and combat decisions. However, other aspects of shipboard life were managed democratically. The quartermaster, another elected position, was responsible for distributing provisions and ensuring discipline among the crew. Pirates adhered to a code of conduct, known as the Pirate Articles, which outlined rules for behavior and punishments for infractions. Food and water. Provisions aboard pirate ships were often inadequate and of poor quality. Fresh food was scarce, and the crew subsisted primarily on salted meat, hardtack, and dried legumes. These rations were supplemented with whatever could be foraged or stolen during raids. Freshwater was equally limited. It was stored in barrels and often became contaminated, leading to outbreaks of dysentery and other waterborne diseases. Alcohol, particularly rum, was more readily available than clean water. Pirates often consumed it to stave off thirst and to alleviate the discomforts of their harsh environment. While this practice helped with hydration, it also contributed to health problems and unruly behavior among the crew. Sanitation and hygiene. Hygiene aboard pirate ships was rudimentary at best. With limited access to fresh water and no facilities for bathing, personal cleanliness was a low priority. The crew often slept in close quarters below deck, leading to the rapid spread of lice, fleas, and other pests. The air below deck was thick and fetid, filled with the stench of unwashed bodies, rotting food, and human waste. Toilets, if they existed at all, were primitive and located at the stern of the ship. Waste was often thrown overboard, but this practice was not always effective in maintaining cleanliness. The unsanitary conditions led to frequent illnesses and infections, which could quickly incapacitate or kill crew members. Health and medical care. Medical care aboard pirate ships was rudimentary and often ineffective. Injuries sustained during raids or accidents were common, and without proper medical treatment, even minor wounds could become fatal. Pirate ships often carried a surgeon, who was typically a crew member with basic medical knowledge. Treatments included the use of rum as an antiseptic, amputation of gangrenous limbs, and rudimentary stitching of wounds. However, without antibiotics or modern surgical tools, infections were rampant and often deadly. Diseases such as scurvy, caused by a lack of vitamin C, were prevalent among pirates. Symptoms include fatigue, swollen gums, and bleeding, leading to death if untreated. The lack of fresh fruits and vegetables contributed to this deficiency, and scurvy was a significant cause of death among pirate crews. Threats and dangers. Pirates faced numerous threats beyond the dangers of disease and poor living conditions. Naval patrols from various nations actively hunted pirates, and encounters with these forces often resulted in violent battles. In addition, rival pirate crews posed a constant threat. Competition for plunder and territory could lead to skirmishes or full-scale conflicts. The unpredictable nature of the sea also contributed to the hardships of pirate life. Storms could appear suddenly, causing damage to the ship and endangering the crew. Navigating through treacherous waters, such as reefs and shoals, required skill and constant vigilance. The constant exposure to the elements led to sunburn, dehydration, and exhaustion, further taxing the crew's endurance. Conclusion. While the allure of treasure and freedom attracted many to the pirate life, the reality was one of hardship and danger. Pirates endured poor living conditions, inadequate provisions, and constant threats to their safety. Their daily routines were dictated by necessity and survival, leaving little room for the romanticized adventures often associated with piracy. The life of a pirate was a dangerous existence, where the pursuit of fortune came at the cost of personal comfort and security. Discipline and punishment, the pirate ship, a realm where freedom clashed with lawlessness, demanded a unique system of discipline. Here, authority was not absolute. It was earned and enforced through a code that balanced order with the ever-present threat of chaos. At the heart of this system were the Pirate Articles, a set of rules agreed upon by the crew before setting sail. These articles were not mere guidelines. They were binding contracts signed by each member, often with a mark or a solemn oath. Failure to adhere to these codes invited swift and sometimes brutal retribution. Punishments aboard a pirate ship varied in severity, tailored to the offense committed. For minor infractions, such as quarreling or neglecting duties, the quartermaster might impose a period of confinement, shackled in irons, left in the dark corners of the ship, enduring isolation and discomfort. This punishment, though not physically damaging, served as a stark reminder of the consequences of disobedience. More severe transgressions, like theft from the crew's shared plunder or desertion during battle, could result in marooning. The offender would be abandoned on a desolate island, left to survive on minimal provisions, a bottle of water, a pistol with a single shot, and a small amount of powder. The intention was clear: to leave the individual to face the harsh elements alone, a fate worse than death for many. For the gravest offenses, such as mutiny or repeated theft, execution was the ultimate punishment. Methods included hanging or shooting, carried out swiftly to maintain order and deter others from similar paths. These executions were often public, serving as grim spectacles that reinforced the seriousness of the pirate code. The captain, while holding authority over navigation and combat decisions, shared the responsibility of maintaining discipline with the quartermaster. The quartermaster, elected by the crew, was the enforcer of the pirate articles, ensuring that justice was meted out fairly and swiftly. This system of shared responsibility prevented the concentration of power and upheld the democratic ideals upon which pirate ships were founded. Despite the harshness of these punishments, the pirate code was not arbitrary. It was a system designed to maintain order and ensure the survival of the crew in the perilous world of piracy. The fear of punishment served as a deterrent, but the code also offered a sense of justice and fairness, a semblance of civilization amidst the lawlessness of the sea. The role of the captain? Aboard a pirate ship, the captain stood as both leader and symbol, a figure whose authority was earned through competence and charisma rather than inherited or imposed. Unlike the rigid hierarchies of naval fleets, pirate crews often elected their captain, valuing skill and decisiveness over rank. This democratic approach meant that a captain's position was never guaranteed. Failure to lead effectively could result in a swift vote of no confidence. In times of battle or pursuit, the captain's word was law. His decisions dictated the ship's course, the timing of attacks, and the strategies employed. However, this authority was not absolute. The crew's trust was paramount, and any sign of cowardice or poor judgment could lead to a loss of command. Beyond combat, the captain was responsible for the ship's log, documenting voyages, encounters, and the distribution of spoils. He oversaw the division of loot, ensuring fairness among the crew. This task was crucial, as disputes over treasure could lead to discord and potential mutiny. The captain's leadership extended to maintaining morale. He was expected to inspire confidence and loyalty, often leading by example. A captain who shared in the hardships and rewards of the crew fostered a sense of unity and purpose. This camaraderie was vital, as the dangers of piracy required a cohesive and motivated crew. In essence, the pirate captain embodied a delicate balance between authority and accountability. His role was not just to command, but to serve as a representative of the crew's collective will. His success hinged on his ability to lead effectively, maintain fairness, and uphold the trust placed in him by his men. Daily life aboard a pirate ship. The rhythm of daily life was dictated by the relentless demands of the sea and the ever-present need for vigilance. The crew's existence was a delicate balance between labor, rest, and the constant threat of danger. The watches? The crew was divided into 3 watches: larboard, starboard, and the 2-hour dog watches. Each watch was responsible for specific duties during their assigned periods. The larboard and starboard watches typically lasted 4 hours, while the dog watches were shorter, preventing the same crew members from always being on duty at night. During their watch, crew members were tasked with maintaining the ship's course, handling sails, and being alert for any signs of pursuit or attack. The quartermaster often oversaw one watch, ensuring that duties were performed efficiently and that discipline was maintained. Chores and maintenance when not on watch. Pirates engaged in various chores to maintain the ship's condition. Holystoning the deck was a common task, involving scrubbing the wooden planks with a sandstone, known as a holystone. This labor-intensive process not only kept the ship clean, but also helped preserve the wood from the harsh marine. Other maintenance duties included repairing sails, mending rigging, and ensuring that weapons and ammunition were in good condition. The ship's carpenter and cooper played crucial roles in these tasks, often working tirelessly to keep the vessel seaworthy. Meals and provisions. Meals aboard a pirate ship were simple and often monotonous. Salted meats, hardtack, and dried legumes formed the staple diet. Fresh produce was a rarity, and when available, it was a welcome treat. The ship's cook, often an experienced sailor, prepared meals in the galley, a cramped and smoky area below deck. Pirates were known to supplement their diet with fish caught during voyages and any fresh provisions acquired during raids. Rest and recreation sleep was a precious commodity. Crew members rested in hammocks slung between beams in the cramped quarters below deck. Space was limited, and privacy was non-existent. Despite the discomfort, these hammocks provided a semblance of rest amidst the chaos of shipboard life. Recreational activities were limited but included singing sea shanties, telling tales of past exploits, and playing cards or dice games. These moments of camaraderie helped to alleviate the monotony and fostered a sense of unity among the crew. The ever-present threat. Despite the structured routines, life aboard a pirate ship was fraught with danger. The constant threat of storms, disease, and encounters with rival pirates or naval forces kept the crew on edge. A pirate's life was one of uncertainty, where survival depended on skill, luck, and the strength of the crew's bond. The ever-present threat. Life aboard a pirate ship was a constant balancing act between routine and peril. While the crew adhered to a structured daily schedule, the looming threats of storms, disease, and encounters with rival pirates or naval forces kept them on edge. The unpredictability of the sea meant that every day could bring new challenges, testing the resilience and adaptability of the crew. Storms and the fury of nature. The Caribbean, with its unpredictable weather patterns, was notorious for sudden and violent storms. Pirate ships, often ill-equipped for such tempests, would find themselves at the mercy of the ocean's fury. The crew would scramble to secure the ship, batten down hatches, and ride out the storm, praying their vessel would endure the onslaught. These storms could cause significant damage, tearing sails, snapping masts, and flooding the lower decks. Surviving a storm was a testament to the ship's construction and the crew's preparedness. Disease below decks. The close quarters and lack of sanitation aboard pirate ships made them breeding grounds for disease. Scurvy, caused by a deficiency of vitamin C, was rampant due to the limited fresh produce available. Other ailments, such as dysentery and typhus, spread quickly among the crew. The ship's surgeon, often more of a barber than a trained medical professional, would do his best to treat the afflicted, but many succumbed to their illnesses. The constant threat of disease added another layer of hardship to an already difficult existence. Encounters with rival pirates and naval forces. Pirates lived with the constant threat of attack from rival pirate crews or naval forces. Encounters could be swift and brutal, with cannon fire echoing across the waves and boarding parties clashing in hand-to-hand combat. The outcome of such encounters often depended on the element of surprise, the skill of the crew, and the quality of their weapons. Losing a battle could mean death or capture, while victory brought spoils and a temporary sense of security. Mutiny and internal strife. Despite the camaraderie among pirates, tensions could run high. Disagreements over leadership, shares of plunder, or treatment could lead to mutiny. The pirate code, while promoting a sense of equality, also outlined strict punishments for those who broke it. Mutineers could face marooning, execution, or being left behind on a deserted island. The ever-present possibility of internal strife added to the volatile nature of pirate life. The constant search for resources. Pirate ships were often low on essential supplies. Freshwater was scarce, and provisions like food and ammunition were constantly running low. The crew would frequently stop at islands or coastal towns to scavenge for resources, often resorting to theft or trade. The need to replenish supplies kept the crew on the move, always searching for their next opportunity. A life of uncertainty. In the end, life aboard a pirate ship was one of uncertainty. Every day brought new challenges, and survival depended on the crew's ability to adapt and persevere. The promise of treasure and freedom was often overshadowed by the harsh realities of life at sea. Yet, for many pirates, the allure of the open ocean and the thrill of the chase were worth the risks. The dreaded scourge of scurvy, the silent killer. In the age of sail, when wooden ships creaked under the weight of their cargo, and the vast expanse of the ocean stretched endlessly before them, sailors faced numerous perils. Storms could tear sails asunder. Pirates lurked in hidden coves, and the threat of shipwreck was ever present. Yet, among these dangers, there was one that was silent, insidious, and often more deadly than all the others combined. Scurvy. Scurvy was a disease that struck without warning, its symptoms creeping in slowly, almost imperceptibly. At first, there was a general feeling of malaise, a sense of fatigue that no amount of rest could alleviate. Joints began to ache, and muscles felt weak. Sailors, accustomed to the rigors of their work, found themselves struggling to perform even the simplest tasks. As the days passed, the condition worsened. The gums, once firm and healthy, began to swell and turn a dark, purplish hue. They became spongy to the touch and bled at the slightest provocation. Teeth, once secure, loosened and fell out, leaving sailors with gaping mouths and foul-smelling breath. Bruises appeared on the skin without any apparent cause, and wounds that would normally heal with time festered and refused to close. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of scurvy was its unpredictability. One day a sailor might be healthy and strong. The next he could be bedridden, his body ravaged by the disease. And once it took hold, scurvy was relentless. Without treatment, it could lead to death, often in the most gruesome manner. The cause of scurvy was a mystery to sailors and physicians alike. Some believed it was a result of bad air. Others thought it was due to poor hygiene or the damp conditions aboard ship. The true culprit, however, was something far simpler: a lack of fresh fruits and vegetables in the diet. Without these, the body lacked vitamin C, a crucial nutrient for maintaining healthy connective tissues. In the confined quarters of a ship, where fresh produce was scarce and often spoiled quickly, scurvy became a constant threat. Long voyages, sometimes lasting months, meant that sailors were deprived of the very foods that could have kept them healthy. The disease spread silently, claiming lives without warning, and leaving behind a trail of suffering and death. The nickname Limey for British sailors stems from this very scourge. In an effort to combat scurvy, the British Navy began issuing lime juice to its sailors during long voyages. This practice, though not fully understood at the time, helped to reduce the incidence of the disease and gave British sailors a reputation for being healthier than their counterparts. Scurvy was not just a disease. It was a silent killer that haunted the seas, claiming the lives of countless sailors throughout history. Its legacy serves as a reminder of the importance of nutrition and the perils of neglecting the body's basic needs. Symptoms and suffering as the days at sea stretched into weeks, then months. The sailors aboard the aging wooden vessels began to feel the creeping malaise that signaled the onset of scurvy. At first, it was a subtle fatigue, a weariness that no amount of rest seemed to alleviate. But soon the symptoms intensified, manifesting in ways that were both grotesque and terrifying. The gums, once firm and healthy, began to swell and turn a dark, purplish hue. They became spongy to the touch and bled at the slightest provocation. Teeth, once secure, loosened and fell out, leaving sailors with gaping mouths and foul-smelling breath. Bruises appeared on the skin without any apparent cause, and wounds that would normally heal with time festered and refused to close. The body seemed to unravel from the inside out. Joints became swollen and painful, making even the simplest tasks excruciating. Legs and arms ached with a deep, gnawing pain that no amount of rest could soothe. The skin, once resilient, became fragile and prone to tearing. Old scars reopened and new sores appeared, oozing pus and refusing to heal. The body, deprived of the essential nutrients it needed, began to break down. Perhaps the most haunting symptom was the onset of calenture, a delirium that caused sailors to hallucinate that the sea was a lush green meadow. In their fevered state, they would leap overboard, believing they could walk on solid ground, only to drown in the merciless waves. It was a tragic irony that the very sea they sailed upon, seeking sustenance, fortune, became the grave for many who succumbed to this madness. The psychological toll was equally devastating. Men who had once been strong and vibrant became shadows of themselves, their spirits crushed by the relentless assault on their bodies. Morale plummeted as the disease spread, and the once bustling decks fell silent, save for the groans of the afflicted. The camaraderie that had bound the crew together began to fray as fear and despair took hold. The officers, too, were not immune. While they may have been better nourished, the close quarters and shared conditions meant that no one was truly safe. The disease did not discriminate. It struck indiscriminately, regardless of rank or status. The officers watched helplessly as their men withered away, and many found themselves powerless to halt the progression of the disease. As the death toll mounted, the question arose, what could be done? The traditional remedies, bleeding, purging, and the application of various salves and potions proved ineffective. The disease mocked these efforts, continuing its relentless march. It became clear that a new approach was needed, one that addressed the root cause of the affliction. In the absence of a cure, the sailors turned to superstition and folklore. Some believed that the disease was a punishment from the gods, a divine retribution for their sins. Others sought solace in religious rituals, praying for deliverance from the scourge. But these efforts, while providing some comfort, did little to halt the spread of the disease. The suffering is not confined to the living. The bodies of the dead were often left to rot where they fell, as the crew lacked the strength and resources to properly dispose of them. The stench of decay permeated the air, adding to the misery of the living. The once pristine decks became a macabre testament to the ravages of the disease. And yet, amid the suffering, there was a glimmer of hope. Some sailors, particularly those in the British Navy, began to notice that the men who consumed citrus fruits seemed to fare better. They recovered more quickly and were less likely to succumb to the disease. This observation, though anecdotal, would lay the groundwork for a breakthrough that would change the course of naval history. But for many, the damage had already been done. The legacy of scurvy was one of pain, death, and despair. It was the silent killer that struck without warning and left devastation in its wake. Its grip on the sailors of the age of sail was unyielding, and it would take a monumental effort to break free from its clutches. As the disease ravaged the fleets, the realization dawned that the answer might lie in something as simple as fresh fruit. But this revelation would not come easily. The medical establishment was slow to embrace this idea, clinging to outdated theories and practices. It would take a determined physician, willing to challenge the status quo, to bring about the change that was desperately needed. The battle against scurvy was far from over. But with each passing day, the possibility of a solution grew closer. The sailors, battered and broken, held on to the hope that relief was on the horizon. And in time, their perseverance would lead to a discovery that would save countless lives and change the course of history. Lack of knowledge in the 17th and 18th centuries. Scurvy was a persistent and deadly affliction for sailors. Despite its devastating effects, the cause remained a mystery, and the medical community's understanding was limited. The prevailing theories were based on observation and speculation rather than scientific evidence. One common belief was that scurvy resulted from bad air or foul air aboard ships. This theory suggested that the confined spaces and lack of ventilation led to the accumulation of harmful vapors, which in turn caused the disease. To combat this, sailors were sometimes subjected to various treatments aimed at purging the body of these supposed toxins. Another prevalent theory was that scurvy was a form of putrefaction within the body. This idea posited that the body's humors became corrupted, leading to the symptoms observed in scurvy. As a result, treatments often involved methods intended to restore balance, such as bleeding, purging, and the administration of various concoctions. The medical community also relied heavily on traditional remedies and folk knowledge. Herbal treatments, such as infusions of scurvy grass, were commonly used, though their effectiveness was limited. These remedies were based on anecdotal evidence and lacked scientific validation. Despite these efforts, scurvy continued to claim the lives of countless sailors. The lack of a clear understanding of the disease's cause hindered effective prevention and treatment. It wasn't until the 18th century that more systematic approaches began to emerge. In 1747, British naval surgeon James Lind conducted a controlled experiment aboard the HMS Salisbury. He divided 12 scurvy-afflicted sailors into 6 pairs, each receiving different treatments. The pair that consumed citrus fruits showed remarkable improvement, suggesting a link between diet and scurvy. However, Lind's findings were not immediately adopted by the Royal Navy. It took several decades before the medical community and naval authorities began to recognize the importance of diet in preventing scurvy. The delay in accepting Lind's conclusions highlights the challenges faced by early medical science. Without a clear understanding of vitamins and nutrition, the connection between scurvy and vitamin C deficiency was not apparent. It wasn't until the 20th century that the role of vitamin C in preventing scurvy was fully understood. The history of scurvy underscores the importance of scientific inquiry and the need for evidence-based approaches in medicine. It also serves as a reminder of the hardships faced by sailors and the lengths to which they went to combat the scourge of scurvy. The British Navy's discovery in 1747 aboard the HMS Salisbury. Dr. James Lind, a Scottish naval surgeon, conducted a groundbreaking experiment that would change the course of naval health forever. At the time, scurvy was a rampant killer among sailors, and its cause was a mystery. Lind hypothesized that diet played a crucial role in the disease's onset and progression. To test his theory, Lind selected 12 sailors who were suffering from scurvy. He divided them into 6 pairs, ensuring each pair had similar symptoms and conditions. Each pair received a different treatment. One group was given a quart of cider daily. Another received 25 drops of elixir of vitriol. One had 2 spoonfuls of vinegar. Another took a course of seawater. One group consumed 2 oranges and 1 lemon daily. And the last received a concoction of garlic, mustard, balsam of Peru, and myrrh. The results were striking. The pair that consumed the citrus fruits showed remarkable improvement within 6 days, with one sailor fit for duty and the other nearly recovered. In contrast, the other treatments had little to no effect. Lind documented his findings in his 1753 publication. A treatise on the scurvy, which is considered one of the earliest examples of a controlled clinical trial. Despite the compelling evidence, the British Navy was slow to adopt Lind's recommendations. It wasn't until 1794, under the leadership of Rear Admiral Allen Gardner, that lemon juice was issued to sailors on a voyage to India. The success of this trial led to the widespread adoption of citrus juice as a preventive measure against scurvy in the Royal Navy. This practice virtually eradicated scurvy among British sailors and earned them the nickname limeys from American sailors, referencing the lime juice used to prevent the disease. Lind's discovery not only saved countless lives, but also marked a significant advancement in medical science, demonstrating the importance of diet in disease prevention. His work laid the foundation for future research into nutrition and its role in health, forever altering the course of naval history. The nickname limey, the British Navy's adoption of lime. Juice as a preventive measure against scurvy led to a distinctive nickname for its sailors, limeys. This term, initially coined with a tone of derision, has since become a part of the cultural lexicon. The origin of limey dates back to the late 19th century. In 1888, Australian and New Zealand slang used limey to refer to English immigrants, derived from the British Navy's practice of issuing lime juice to prevent scurvy. This practice was based on the findings of Dr. James Lind in 1747, who discovered that citrus fruits could prevent scurvy, a disease caused by vitamin C deficiency. The British Navy's use of lime juice was not without its challenges. Limes have only about 1/4 the vitamin C content of lemons, and the preservation methods of the time further reduced the vitamin's potency. Despite these limitations, the practice significantly reduced the incidence of scurvy among sailors. The term limey was initially used by American sailors to refer to British sailors who consumed lime juice. Over time, it evolved to describe British people in general, especially in the United States. By the early 20th century, limey was commonly used in American slang to refer to the British. While limey began as a term of mockery, it has since been embraced in various contexts, including popular culture and media. However, its use can still carry a pejorative connotation, depending on the context and intent. In summary, the nickname limey reflects the British Navy's innovative approach to combating scurvy and highlights the intersection of language, culture, and history. The horror of keelhauling. The act of fine keelhauling was a brutal form of punishment used by naval forces during the Age of Sail, particularly in the 17th and 18th centuries. The term keelhauling originates from the Dutch word keelhaulen, meaning to haul under the keel of a ship. The punishment involved tying a sailor to a rope that was looped beneath the ship's hull. The sailor was then thrown overboard on one side of the vessel and dragged under the keel to the other side. This process was often repeated, sometimes from bow to stern, depending on the severity of the offense and the discretion of the commanding officer. Keel hauling was employed for serious offenses such as mutiny, theft, desertion, or insubordination. The severity of the punishment was intended to serve as a deterrent to others, demonstrating the harsh consequences of defying naval authority. While the practice was most famously associated with the British and Dutch navies, it was also reported among pirates and other maritime cultures of the time. However, it's important to note that the widespread use of keel hauling has been debated among historians, with some suggesting it was more of a myth than a common practice. Despite its infamy, keel hauling was eventually abolished in most naval forces by the mid-19th century, as more humane methods of discipline and punishment were developed. Today, the term keel hauling has entered the English language as a metaphor for severe reprimand or punishment, though its historical roots are far more literal and grisly. Execution of the punishment. Keel hauling was a brutal and terrifying form of punishment employed by naval forces during the Age of Sail. The procedure was as follows. A sailor convicted of a serious offense was tied to a rope that was looped beneath the ship's hull. The sailor was then thrown overboard on one side of the vessel and dragged under the keel to the other side. This process was often repeated, sometimes from bow to stern, depending on the severity of the offense and the discretion of the commanding officer. The punishment was typically carried out in front of the entire crew, serving as a public spectacle intended to deter others from committing similar offenses. The victim's body was often subjected to the ship's barnacle-encrusted hull, leading to severe lacerations and, in many cases, death. While the practice was most famously associated with the British and Dutch navies, it was also reported among pirates and other maritime cultures of the time. However, it's important to note that the widespread use of keel hauling has been debated among historians, with some suggesting it was more of a myth than a common practice. Despite its infamy, keel hauling was eventually abolished in most naval forces by the mid-19th century, as more humane methods of discipline and punishment were developed. Today, the term keel hauling has entered the English language as a metaphor for severe reprimand or punishment, though its historical roots are far more literal and grisly. Physical consequences. Keel hauling was not only a terrifying spectacle, but also a profoundly painful and often lethal punishment. The act involved a sailor being tied to a rope looped beneath the ship, thrown overboard, and dragged under the vessel's hull, typically from one side to the other. This process subjected the victim to numerous physical hazards. The ship's keel. The central structural component running from bow to stern was often encrusted with barnacles and other marine growths. As the sailor was dragged beneath the hull, these sharp and abrasive organisms would tear into the skin, causing deep lacerations and severe tissue damage. The wounds were prone to infection due to the saltwater environment and the lack of proper medical care. In addition to the physical injuries, the act of being submerged and dragged underwater posed significant risks. The victim could easily inhale water, leading to drowning. Even if the sailor managed to avoid drowning, the trauma from the physical injuries often led to death. Survivors, if any, were left with permanent scars and debilitating physical impairments. While some accounts suggest that keel hauling was intended as a non-lethal punishment, the inherent dangers and the severity of the injuries inflicted often resulted in death. The practice was eventually abolished in most naval forces by the mid-19th century as more humane. Methods of discipline and punishment were developed. Today, keel hauling is remembered as one of the most brutal forms of punishment in maritime history, serving as a grim reminder of the harsh realities faced by sailors during the Age of Sail. Psychological effects. Keel hauling was not only a physically excruciating punishment, but also a profound psychological ordeal for sailors. The anticipation of such a fate was often more terrifying than the act itself, as it represented a complete loss of control and dignity. Being subjected to this punishment meant being stripped of one's humanity, reduced to a mere object of discipline. The experience was designed to instill fear and maintain strict order among the crew. Survivors of keel hauling often carried deep psychological scars, including post-traumatic stress disorder, nightmares, and a pervasive sense of helplessness. The trauma was not just from the physical pain, but from the humiliation and the utter vulnerability experienced during the ordeal. The public nature of keel hauling further amplified its psychological impact. Witnessing a fellow sailor undergo such a brutal punishment served as a stark reminder of the consequences of deviance, creating an atmosphere of constant fear and tension among the crew. This fear was a tool used by naval authorities to maintain discipline, but it also eroded the morale and mental well-being of sailors. While the physical wounds from keel hauling might heal over time, the psychological trauma often lingered, affecting sailors long after they left the Navy. The legacy of keel hauling is a testament to the extreme measures once employed to enforce discipline at sea and the enduring human cost of such practices. Historical accounts keel hauling, a brutal form of punishment at sea, is documented in various historical accounts, illustrating its use and the controversy surrounding it. One notable depiction is the painting The Keel Hauling of the Ship's Surgeon of Admiral Jan van Ness by Liev Peters. Verschuwe, created between 1660 and 1686. This artwork portrays the surgeon being keel-hauled as a severe punishment, with numerous onlookers witnessing the event. The painting serves as a visual representation of the practice and its intended deterrent effect on the crew. In the 19th century, the practice of keel hauling was reportedly still in use. For instance, in 1882, a report highlighted the use of keel hauling by British forces in Egypt, indicating that the punishment persisted in certain naval contexts well into the late 19th century. Despite its infamy, the prevalence of keel hauling is debated among historians. Some argue that it was more of a myth than a common practice, with limited documented instances. Others suggest that it was employed more frequently, particularly in the Dutch and British navies during the 17th and 18th centuries. The term limey is believed to have originated from the British Navy's practice of issuing lime juice to prevent scurvy. While the connection to keel hauling is not direct, both practices reflect the harsh realities of naval discipline during the Age of Sail. In summary, historical accounts of keel hauling provide insight into its use as a severe punishment at sea. While the exact frequency and extent of its application remain subjects of historical debate, the documented instances underscore the brutal measures employed to maintain discipline among sailors. The mystery of walking the plank origins of the myth. The image of pirates forcing captives to walk the plank has become a staple of pirate lore, but historical evidence for this practice is scant. The earliest documented use of the phrase walking the plank appears in a 1763 article from the Public Advertiser, which describes an incident where captives were made to walk into the sea on a plank. However, this account is from the Caribbean and involves Spanish and Caribbean pirates, not the stereotypical pirates of popular imagination. The term gained further traction in the 18th century, notably in Francis Grose's Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue, which described it as a method of execution during mutinies. This entry likely contributed to the myth's entrenchment in maritime folklore. Despite these references, there is no substantial evidence that walking the plank was a common practice among pirates during the Golden Age of Piracy. Pirates were more likely to employ other methods of punishment, such as flogging, marooning, or simply throwing individuals overboard. The enduring image of walking the plank was popularized in the 19th century through works like Charles Elms's The Pirate's Own Book and Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, which depicted the act as a dramatic pirate ritual. These literary works, along with illustrations by artists like Howard Pyle, cemented the image in public consciousness. In summary, while the concept of walking the plank has deep roots in pirate mythology, historical evidence for its widespread use is limited, suggesting it was more a product of fiction than fact. Rare instances. While the image of pirates forcing captives to walk the plank is iconic, historical evidence for such practices is limited and often contested. The earliest documented instance appears in a 1763 article from the Public Advertiser, describing pirates in the Caribbean compelling captives to walk into the sea on a plank. However, this account is from the Caribbean and involves Spanish and Caribbean pirates, not the stereotypical pirates of popular imagination. Another account from 1829 reports that pirates aboard the Dutch brig Van Frederica forced most of the crew to walk the plank with cannonballs tied to their feet. This incident is one of the few documented cases where the plank was reportedly used as a method of execution. Despite these instances, many historians argue that walking the plank was more of a myth than a common practice among pirates. Real pirates during the 17th and 18th centuries were more likely to use methods such as flogging, marooning, or simply throwing individuals overboard. In summary, while there are a few documented instances of walking the plank, these are rare and not representative of standard pirate practices. The enduring image of the plank-walking pirate has been largely shaped by literature and popular culture, rather than historical reality. Execution process, the act of walking the plank, is often depicted in popular culture as a dramatic execution method where a victim is blindfolded, bound, and forced to walk along a narrow wooden plank extending over the side of a ship, ultimately falling into the sea. This portrayal is largely a product of fiction and has little basis in historical reality. In the few documented instances where the plank was reportedly used, the process was less theatrical. Victims were typically not blindfolded or bound, but were made to walk off a plank or beam extended over the side of the ship. In some cases, captives were tied to heavy weights before being forced into the sea, ensuring their demise. For example, in 1829, pirates intercepted the Dutch brig Van Frederica and murdered most of the crew by making them walk the plank with cannonballs tied to their feet. Despite these rare occurrences, historians generally agree that walking the plank was not a common practice among pirates. Pirates preferred more efficient methods of dealing with captives, such as marooning, which involved abandoning individuals on deserted islands, or simply throwing them overboard. In summary, while walking the plank is a compelling image in pirate lore, its execution was likely less dramatic than often depicted and was not a standard practice among pirates. Survival stories, while pirate lore often depicts victims of walking the plank as meeting a watery grave. There are rare instances where individuals survived such ordeals. These accounts, however, are exceptional and not representative of standard pirate practices. The case of George Wood. One of the earliest recorded instances involves George Wood, a sailor who was reportedly involved in a mutiny in the 1760s. Before his execution in 1769, Wood allegedly confessed to his chaplain that he had made officers walk the plank during the mutiny. However, this account is based on Wood's confession and lacks corroborative evidence. Some historians question the authenticity of this claim, suggesting it may have been fabricated or exaggerated. Survival of the plank? A mythical narrative? There are anecdotal tales of individuals surviving the plank, often involving miraculous escapes or improbable feats of endurance. These stories, while compelling, are largely anecdotal and lack verifiable historical documentation. They contribute to the mythos surrounding pirate punishments that should be viewed with skepticism due to the absence of concrete evidence. The role of marooning and other punishments in reality, pirates were more inclined to use methods such as marooning abandoning individuals on deserted islands as a form of punishment. This practice often led to death due to exposure, starvation, or dehydration. Marooning was considered a more practical and effective method of dealing with captives or mutineers. Survival stories related to walking the plank are scarce and often lack historical verification. While they add to the intrigue of pirate lore, they do not reflect the common practices of piracy during the Golden Age. The enduring image of the plank-walking pirate has been largely shaped by literature and popular culture rather than historical reality. Cultural legacy and modern interpretations, despite its rarity in historical accounts. The image of walking the plank has become one of the most enduring symbols of piracy, deeply embedded in popular culture. This myth has been perpetuated through literature, theater, film, and television, shaping public perception of pirates and their practices. Literary origins. The earliest known literary reference to walking the plank appears in Daniel Defoe's 1724 work, A General History of the Pirates. Defoe describes Mediterranean pirates forcing captives to walk a ship's ladder extended over the sea, presenting it as a form of execution. This portrayal likely drew inspiration from earlier practices, but was dramatized for narrative effect. 19th century popularization. The concept gained further prominence in the 19th century through works like Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island and Howard Pyle's illustrations. Stevenson's novel featured characters discussing the act, embedding the idea into the public consciousness. Pyle's 1887 illustration for Harper's Weekly depicted a dramatic scene of a man being forced to walk the plank, solidifying the image in visual culture. Film and television influenced the 1950 Disney adaptation of Peter. Pan introduced the iconic scene of Captain Hook forcing Wendy to walk the plank, a moment that has since become synonymous with pirate lore. This portrayal, along with depictions in films like Pirates of the Caribbean, has reinforced the myth for generations. Modern interpretations. Today, the phrase walk the plank is often used metaphorically to describe someone being forced into a difficult or perilous situation. It appears in various media, including books, cartoons, and video games, often accompanied by the stereotypical image of a pirate with a parrot and a cutlass. This enduring image continues to captivate audiences, despite its lack of historical accuracy. Conclusion: while walking the plank was likely more myth than reality, its place in pirate mythology is firmly established. The act has transcended its dubious historical origins to become a symbol of piracy, illustrating how fiction can shape and perpetuate cultural perceptions. The punishments of pirates. The Pirate Code and its enforcement pirate crews during the Golden Age of Piracy often operated under a set of rules known as the Pirate Code or Articles of Agreement. These articles were typically drawn up when a new crew was formed or when a pirate ship was captured. The code served several purposes. These codes were established to maintain order and discipline aboard pirate ships, ensuring that all crew members adhered to agreed-upon conduct. While the specifics varied among different pirate crews, common elements include rules on the division of loot, conduct during battle, and punishments for violations, reflecting the importance of maintaining order within the crew. Common penalties included structure and purpose of the Pirate Code. The Pirate Code was not a singular universal document, but rather a collection of articles agreed upon by each crew. Ensuring fair distribution of plunder. Loot was divided equally among the crew, with shares assigned based on rank and role. Maintaining discipline. Rules were established to govern behavior. Confining them to a dark, damp part of the ship sometimes during storms, fostering a sense of equality and shared responsibility, such as prohibitions on fighting among crew members and guidelines for conduct during engagements. And the captain's power was limited by the crew's consent. The quartermaster, elected by the crew, held significant authority, particularly in matters of discipline and the enforcement of the pirate code, offering a structured approach to resolving disputes and handling infractions. Providing legal framework, the code acted as a form of self-governance. Common punishments for violating the pirate code often resulted in severe punishments, often with minimal supplies, leading to certain death. Marooning. The offender was abandoned on a deserted island. Flogging. Public whipping as a form of corporal punishment. Clapping in irons. Shackling the offender's wrists and ankles. Execution. In extreme cases, such as mutiny or murder, the punishment could be death, often by hanging. Enforcement and governance. Unlike naval ships, where authority was centralized, pirate ships operated under a more democratic system. Decisions were often made collectively. This system of governance ensured that all crew members had a voice in the operation of the ship and the enforcement of rules. Marooning, a cruel form of exile. Marooning was one of the most severe punishments a pirate could face. Offenders were abandoned on deserted islands, often with minimal provisions, leading to certain death from starvation, exposure, or dehydration. This form of punishment was typically reserved for serious offenses such as desertion during battle, death from fellow crew members, or other breaches of the pirate code. Structure and purpose of marooning. The practice of marooning was not a random act, but a calculated decision made by the pirate crew. Pirate articles or codes of conduct often specified marooning as a punishment for certain offenses. For instance, Captain John Phillips' articles from 1723 stipulated that any man who offered to run away or kept secrets from the company would be marooned with 1 bottle of powder, 1 bottle of water, a small arm, and shot. Execution of marooning. When a pirate was sentenced to marooning, the crew would take the offender to a remote, uninhabited island. The marooned individual was typically provided with a pistol, a bottle of water, and sometimes a small amount of gunpowder. The intention was to leave the person stranded with little hope of survival, as the island offered no resources or means of escape. Survival in notable cases, survival after marooning was exceedingly rare. One of the most famous cases involves Alexander Selkirk, a Scottish sailor, who was marooned on an uninhabited island in the South Pacific in 1704. He survived for 4 years before being rescued. His story is believed to have inspired Daniel Defoe's novel Robinson Crusoe. Psychological and physical impact. The psychological toll of marooning was immense. The isolation and uncertainty led to despair and madness in many marooned individuals. Physically, the lack of food and water resulted in starvation, dehydration, and death. The punishment was designed to be a slow and agonizing end, serving as a deterrent to others considering breaking the pirate code. Cultural legacy. Marooning has left a lasting impression on pirate lore and popular culture. The term marooned has entered the lexicon as a metaphor for abandonment and isolation. While the practice was brutal, it underscores the harsh realities of pirate life and the strict codes that govern their conduct. Flogging, the lash of discipline. Flogging was a prevalent form of punishment among pirates during the Golden Age of Piracy. This corporal punishment was typically administered for breaches of the pirate code, such as fighting among crew members, neglecting duties, or bringing women aboard the ship. The severity of the punishment often depended on the offense and the discretion of the crew. The cat o' nine tails. The primary instrument used for flogging was the cat o' nine tails, a whip consisting of 9 knotted cords or thongs. Each thong was designed to cause deep lacerations upon impact, making the punishment both physically painful and psychologically humiliating. The term cat o' nine tails is believed to have originated in the 17th century, and it became synonymous with naval discipline. Moses's law pirate codes often stipulated specific punishments for certain offenses. For instance, according to the 1724 Code of Captain John Phillips, A pirate who struck another would receive 39 lashes, a number referred to as Moses' Law. This number was believed to be the maximum a man could endure without perishing, though many suffered fatal consequences from fewer lashes. Administration of the punishment. The quartermaster, an elected officer among pirates, was typically responsible for overseeing punishments. In the case of flogging, the quartermaster would ensure that the punishment was carried out according to the pirate code. The victim was often tied to the mast or a similar structure, and the flogging would commence sometimes in front of the entire crew to serve as a deterrent. Psychological and physical impact. The effects of flogging were both immediate and long-lasting. Physically, the victim would endure excruciating pain, deep wounds, and potential infections. Psychologically, the experience could lead to lasting trauma, a loss of status among the crew, and, in some cases, a desire for revenge. The public nature of the punishment served to reinforce discipline, but also highlighted the brutal realities of pirate life. Cultural legacy. Flogging has left an indelible mark on pirate lore and popular culture. The image of a pirate enduring the lash has been immortalized in literature, art, and film. While the practice itself has been abolished, its portrayal continues to evoke the harsh discipline and perilous existence of pirates during their heyday. Keelhauling. The ultimate maritime torture, keelhauling was one of the most brutal forms of punishment inflicted upon sailors during the Golden Age of Piracy. This gruesome practice involved dragging a sailor beneath the ship's keel, often resulting in severe injury or death. Execution of keelhauling. The condemned sailor was tied to a rope looped beneath the vessel and thrown overboard. The rope was then hauled, pulling the sailor under the ship's hull from one side to the other, or along the length of the ship. The barnacle-encrusted keel would scrape the victim's body, causing deep lacerations and often leading to fatal blood loss or drowning. Historical instances. While the practice was officially banned in European navies by the mid-1800s, there are reports of its use as late as 1882. The Dutch Navy, in particular, employed keelhauling as a form of punishment during the 17th and 18th centuries. However, its use was not widespread among pirate crews, as evidenced by the lack of documented instances in pirate codes or trial records. Cultural legacy. Despite its limited use, keelhauling has left a lasting impression on maritime lore and popular culture. The term keelhaul has evolved into a metaphor for severe reprimand or punishment. Additionally, artistic depictions and fictional accounts have immortalized the practice, contributing to its enduring association with pirate brutality. Marooning, a cruel form of exile. Marooning was one of the most severe punishments a pirate could face. Offenders were abandoned on deserted islands, often with minimal provisions, leading to certain death from starvation, exposure, or dehydration. This form of punishment was typically reserved for serious offenses such as desertion during battle, death from fellow crew members, or other breaches of the pirate code. Structure and purpose of marooning. The practice of marooning was not a random act, but a calculated decision made by the pirate crew. Pirate articles or codes of conduct often specified marooning as a punishment for certain offenses. For instance, Captain John Phillips' articles from 1723 stipulated that any man who offered to run away or kept secrets from the company would be marooned with 1 bottle of powder, 1 bottle of water, a small arm, and shot. Execution of marooning. When a pirate was sentenced to marooning, the crew would take the offender to a remote, uninhabited island. The marooned individual was typically provided with a pistol, a bottle of water, and sometimes a small amount of gunpowder. The intention was to leave the person stranded with little hope of survival, as the island offered no resources or means of escape. Survival in notable cases, survival after marooning was exceedingly rare. One of the most famous cases involves Alexander Selkirk, a Scottish sailor, who was marooned on an uninhabited island in the South Pacific in 1704. He survived for 4 years before being rescued. His story is believed to have inspired Daniel Defoe's novel Robinson Crusoe. Psychological and physical impact. The psychological toll of marooning was immense. The isolation and uncertainty led to despair and madness in many marooned individuals. Physically, the lack of food and water resulted in starvation, dehydration, and death. The punishment was designed to be a slow and agonizing end, serving as a deterrent to others considering breaking the pirate code. Cultural legacy. Marooning has left a lasting impression on pirate lore and popular culture. The term marooned has entered the lexicon as a metaphor for abandonment and isolation. While the practice was brutal, it underscores the harsh realities of pirate life and the strict codes that govern their conduct. The role of pirate articles establishing the code. Pirate articles, also known as Articles of Agreement, were a set of rules governing the conduct of pirate crews during the Golden Age of Piracy. These codes were established to maintain order, ensure fairness, and promote unity among pirates. Unlike the rigid hierarchies of naval forces, pirate ships often operated under democratic principles. With crew members having a say in decisions and punishments, the articles were typically agreed upon before setting sail and were considered binding contracts. Each crew member would sign or swear allegiance to the code, which outlined various aspects of shipboard life, including the division of loot, conduct during battle, and penalties for offenses. The origins of pirate articles can be traced back to the 17th century, with buccaneers in the Caribbean developing early forms of these codes. Over time, these agreements evolved into more formalized documents, with notable examples such as the Articles of Bartholomew Roberts and Captain John Phillips. These codes were not only practical guidelines, but also served to foster a sense of community and shared purpose among pirates, distinguishing them from the often oppressive naval forces of the time. Enforcement and consequences. Pirate articles were not mere suggestions. They were binding codes of conduct with strict enforcement mechanisms. Pirates operated under a system where adherence to these articles was crucial for the survival and success of the crew. The enforcement of these codes was often carried out by their quartermaster, who held significant authority over daily operations and discipline aboard the ship. Punishments for violations ranged from marooning and whipping to more severe penalties like execution, depending on the gravity of the offense. For instance, bringing women aboard a pirate ship was considered a serious breach of conduct and could result in death. The articles also established a form of self-governance among pirates. Crew members were expected to resolve disputes democratically, with each man having an equal say in decisions. This system helped maintain order and loyalty within the crew, ensuring that personal grievances did not disrupt the functioning of the ship. The collective responsibility for enforcing the code fostered a sense of unity and mutual respect among pirates. Articles of Edward Lowe and George Lowther. Pirates Edward Lowe and George Lowther were known for their brutal enforcement of pirate codes. Their articles included equal shares of loot and provisions for all crew members, marooning for theft or desertion with minimal provisions, punishment for gambling or other misconduct, including flogging or marooning. These articles reflect the harsh and unforgiving nature of their leadership. Articles of the John Gow, Captain John Gow, active in the early 18th century, established articles that included equal shares of loot and provisions, marooning for theft or desertion with minimal provisions, punishment for misconduct, including flogging or marooning. Gow's articles emphasized discipline and the importance of maintaining order among the crew. Articles of Henry Morgan and other buccaneers. Henry Morgan, a notorious buccaneer, and his crew adhered to a set of articles known as the Custom of the Coast. These articles included provisions such as equal shares of loot and provisions, marooning for theft or misconduct with minimal provisions, punishment for misconduct, including flogging or marooning, incentives for capturing enemy flags or performing acts of valor, compensation for injuries sustained during raids, such as payments for lost limbs. Morgan's articles reflect a structured approach to piracy, with clear rewards and penalties to maintain order and incentivize performance. These examples illustrate the diversity and structure of pirate articles during the Golden Age of Piracy. While the specifics varied among captains and crews, Common themes included the equitable distribution of loot, strict discipline, and severe penalties for breaches of conduct. The establishment and adherence to these codes were crucial for maintaining order and ensuring the success of pirate ventures. Notable pirates and their codes. Pirate articles or codes of conduct were essential in maintaining order and discipline among pirate crews during the Golden Age of Piracy. These codes varied among captains but generally shared common themes of democratic governance, equitable distribution of loot, and strict penalties for misconduct. Below are examples of notable pirates and their respective codes. Bartholomew Roberts. Known as Black Bart, was one of the most successful pirates of the era, capturing over 400 ships between 1719 and 1722. His articles, recorded by Captain Charles Johnson in A General History of the Pirates, included provisions such as equal voting rights for all crew members on significant decisions, equal share of provisions and strong liquors unless scarcity necessitated a reduction, marooning or execution for theft exceeding a certain value, prohibition of gambling for money, curfew at 8 p.m., with drinking allowed only on the open deck without lights, maintenance of weapons requiring crew members to keep their firearms and cutlasses clean and ready for action. These articles were designed to promote fairness and discipline among the crew, contributing to Robert's success. Captain John Phillips, active in the early 18th century, established articles that included provisions such as obedience to civil command, with officers receiving shares and prizes, marooning for attempting to desert or keeping secrets from the company, with minimal provisions, punishment for theft or gambling, including marooning or execution, discipline for striking another crew member, with the offender receiving 39 lashes. Phillips' articles emphasize strict discipline and severe penalties for breaches of conduct. Edward Lowe and George Lowther, pirates Edward Lowe and George Lowther, were known for their brutal enforcement of pirate codes. Their articles included equal shares of loot and provisions for all crew members, marooning for theft or desertion with minimal provisions, punishment for gambling or other misconduct, including flogging or marooning. These articles reflect the harsh and unforgiving nature of their leadership. Captain John Gow, active in the early 18th century, established articles that included equal shares of loot and provisions, marooning for theft or desertion with minimal provisions, punishment for misconduct including flogging or marooning. Gow's articles emphasize discipline and the importance of maintaining order among the crew. Henry Morgan and other buccaneers. Henry Morgan, a notorious buccaneer, and his crew adhered to a set of articles known as the Custom of the Coast. These articles include provisions such as equal shares of loot and provisions, marooning for theft or misconduct with minimal provisions, punishment for misconduct including flogging or marooning, incentives for capturing enemy flags or performing acts of valor, compensation for injuries sustained during raids, such as payments for lost limbs. Morgan's articles reflect a structured approach to piracy, with clear rewards and penalties to maintain order and incentivize performance. These examples illustrate the diversity and structure of pirate articles during the Golden Age of Piracy. While the specifics varied among captains and crews, common themes included the equitable distribution of loot, strict discipline, and severe penalties for breaches of conduct. The establishment and adherence to these codes were crucial for maintaining order and ensuring the success of pirate ventures. Legacy of pirate articles. Pirate articles, or codes of conduct, played a pivotal role in shaping the governance and operations of pirate crews during the Golden Age of Piracy. These articles were not mere guidelines, but binding contracts that ensured order, fairness, and discipline among the crew. Their legacy extends beyond the high seas, influencing modern concepts of governance, labor rights, and organizational management. Democratic foundations. One of the most significant aspects of pirate articles was their emphasis on democracy and collective decision-making. Unlike the rigid hierarchies of naval or merchant ships, pirate crews operated on principles of equality and shared governance. Every crew member had an equal vote in matters of importance, such as electing officers and deciding on courses of action. This democratic approach fostered a sense of community and mutual respect among pirates, setting them apart from other maritime workers of the time. Influence on labor rights. The equitable distribution of loot and provisions outlined in pirate articles can be seen as an early form of labor rights advocacy. By ensuring that all crew members received an equal share of the spoils, pirates challenged the exploitative practices prevalent in other sectors. This focus on fairness and compensation prefigured later labor movements that sought to address issues of wage disparity and workers' rights. Organizational management insights. Pirate articles also offer valuable insights into early forms of organizational management. The establishment of clear rules and consequences for misconduct helped maintain order and discipline within the crew. Roles and responsibilities were well defined, with officers elected based on merit and the needs of the crew. This organizational structure allowed pirate crews to operate efficiently and effectively, despite their often informal and transient nature. Cultural impact. The legacy of pirate articles extends into popular culture, where they have been romanticized and mythologized. The image of the pirate as a rebellious yet principled figure has been perpetuated through literature, film, and folklore. While these portrayals often embellish the realities of pirate life, they have nonetheless contributed to the enduring fascination with piracy and the ideals associated with pirate codes. The pirate articles of the Golden Age of Piracy were more than just a set of rules. They were a reflection of the values and aspirations of pirate crews. Their emphasis on democracy, fairness, and organization provided a model for self-governance and collective action that resonates even today. While the era of piracy has long since passed, the principles embodied in pirate articles continue to influence discussions on governance, labor rights, and organizational management. The end of the Golden Age of Piracy, rise of naval power. The decline of piracy in the early 18th century was significantly influenced by the rise of powerful national navies, particularly the British Royal Navy. During the Golden Age of Piracy, pirates operated with relative impunity, exploiting weak colonial administrations and the limited naval presence of European powers. However, as European nations emerged from prolonged conflicts, such as the War of Spanish Succession, they sought to reassert control over their maritime interests. This led to the expansion and modernization of naval forces, which played a crucial role in suppressing piracy. The British Royal Navy, in particular, became a formidable force, employing advanced tactics and well-trained personnel to combat pirate activities. The increased naval presence disrupted pirate operations, making it increasingly difficult for pirates to operate with the same freedom they once enjoyed. Naval patrols became more frequent, and the enforcement of maritime laws more stringent, leading to the gradual suppression of pirate activities in key regions. Additionally, the establishment of colonial governors with explicit instructions to eradicate piracy further curtailed pirate havens and routes. The coordinated efforts of national navies and colonial authorities marked a turning point in the battle against piracy, leading to the eventual end of the Golden Age of Piracy. Decline of pirate havens. As the 18th century unfolded, the pirate havens that once hummed with lawless energy began to crumble under the weight of coordinated colonial action and naval reinforcements. Islands like Port Royal, Nassau, Tortuga, and Madagascar, which had served as anarchic sanctuaries for scoundrels and rogues, found themselves besieged, not just by guns, but by the inexorable tide of state authority and shifting global priorities. One of the earliest harbingers of change was Jamaica's Port Royal, once a bastion of buccaneers in the mid-1600s. It had degenerated into a hive of moral excess, earning the grim sobriquet, the Sodom of the New World. Its appeal to pirates and privateers alike derived from proximity to trade routes, ease of resupply, and toleration from corrupt officials. By the 1680s, however, Britain had passed anti-piracy legislation, and Port Royal began to pivot from pirate-friendly to pirate-feared. Executions at Gallows Point of pirates such as Charles Vane and Calico Rackham signaled a shift from haven to horror. The combination of natural disasters, reform, and naval crackdowns turned this once wild port into a cautionary tale for pirate societies. Nassau in New Providence took over as the de facto Republic of Pirates in the Bahamas around 1713. Established governance was minimal, the defenses were weak, and piracy flourished under an informal democratic code. This so-called republic led by famous buccaneers like Benjamin Hornigold, Edward Teach, and Jack Rackham thrived until 1718, the arrival of Woodes Rogers. Appointed as governor with a mission to reinstate order, changed everything. Rogers offered pardons, restored British sovereignty, and fortified Nassau with guns and forts. Pirates were given the stark choice of pardon or pursuance. Many capitulated, and by the end of 1718, British control was re-established in the Bahamas. Elsewhere, across the Caribbean and Indian Ocean, pirate strongholds evaporated under similar pressures. Tortuga, once a hub for buccaneers, fell into decline as European powers reasserted control. Madagascar, which had become a base for Indian Ocean pirate networks, began losing its autonomy and fell victim to naval raids and European colonization attempts. In the Pacific and along the coast of India, former pirate havens saw their reputations tarnished and their usefulness to pirate crews diminished. A key factor in this decline was the dramatic expansion of European naval forces following the War of Spanish Succession. During peacetime, these navies found employment by hunting pirates instead of chasing privateers of rival nations. Between 1670 and 1718, the number of Royal Navy ships surged from a mere couple dozen to well over 100. This boosted capacity enabled sustained patrols, convoy escorts, and anti-piracy operations across expansive ocean regions. By the early 1720s, tailies of pirate boards in the Atlantic had waned. Pirates rapidly became the hunted, rather than the hunters. Legal tools complemented naval power. Colonial governors and colonial assemblies sharpened anti-piracy statutes. For example, Section 7 of the Colonial Act on Caribbean Piracy mandated capital punishment for pirates, paving the way for swift trials and public executions. Parliament and colonial courts worked in tandem to eliminate pirate havens and deter would-be outlaws via show trials and gallows ceremonies in major ports. Hanging near docks became grim spectacles, underscoring that piracy no longer paid. Over time, the economic viability that once made piracy attractive faded. Routes became heavily patrolled, merchant vessels traveled in guarded convoys, and insurance premiums rose. Meanwhile, former pirate havens saw commerce shift toward legitimate channels or collapse under official pressure. With dwindling returns and growing risks, the pirate profession lost its luster. Many pirates accepted pardons, others turned to smuggling or legitimate trade, and some met their fate on the gallows or in battle. By the mid-1720s, the Golden Age had effectively ended. Once uncontrolled enclaves were pacified, naval dominance reasserted, and colonies prioritized stability over piracy revenue. Pirate havens, once celebratory centers of freedom, became relics or prisons. The era that produced Blackbeard, Calico Jack, and Anne Bonny had receded into history, remembered now as a brief, turbulent chapter of legend woven from violence, rebellion, and inevitable collapse. Capture of pirate leaders as the Golden Age of Piracy drew to a close in the early 18th century. The capture and downfall of notorious pirate leaders shattered the myth of invincibility that had long surrounded them. Legendary figures like Blackbeard, Bartholomew Roberts, and William Fly became high-profile examples of justice delivered and deterrence enforced. Blackbeard's violent end. Edward Blackbeard Teach was hunted down in a dramatic naval confrontation off Ocracoke, North Carolina. British Lieutenant Robert Maynard, commanding HMS Pearl and Jane, managed to board Blackbeard's ship in November 1718. Teach was shot 5 times and suffered over 20 sword wounds before he finally fell, his death marking a turning point in anti-piracy efforts. When Maynard returned with Blackbeard's severed head affixed to his ship's bowsprit, it sent a chilling message. Even pirates, famed for brutality and reputation, were vulnerable. The fall of Bartholomew Roberts. Bartholomew Roberts, known as Black Bart, commanded one of the most successful pirate fleets in history, plundering over 400 ships between 1719 and 1722. His reign ended at the Battle of Cape Lopez off the coast of Gabon. Naval Captain Shalona Ogle intercepted Roberts aboard HM Swallow on February 10th, 1722. Roberts died in the opening broadside, and of his crew, over 270 were captured. 52 were hanged in a single mass execution trial held at Cape Coast Castle, the largest such event in a colonial admiralty court. This public execution deeply dented pirate morale and marked a decisive blow to piracy in West Africa and beyond. William Fly, the last of the old guard. William Fly is often cited as among the final pirates of the Golden Age. He raided New England, coastal shipping briefly in 1726 before being captured and quickly tried in Boston. Fly was publicly hanged on July 12, 1726. His body was gibbeted strung up in chains as a gruesome milepost for would-be criminals. His death is regarded by historians as one of the final nails in piracy's coffin for that era. Widespread enforcement, hangings, branding, prison. Captives faced a grim suite of punishments. Most were tried on capital charges and hanged often immediately after trial. High-profile executions became spectacles, set at dockside to send warnings to visiting mariners. At Execution Dock in Wapping, London, and at Port Royal's Dead Man's Cay, pirates were prominently executed or displayed in iron cages to rot as gruesome reminders. Branding with a flaming iron P on the forehead was also common in the Indian Ocean, where piracy was rampant under East India Company interests. For lesser offenders or young recruits, jail time, often involving brutal hard labor, was imposed. Colonial courts began conducting swift trials without defense, condemning many to prison hulks or transportation to penal colonies. According to colonial records, between 1716 and 1726, over 400 pirates had been executed, with many more who died in capture or during court proceedings. In one notorious incident, after Robert's death, 52 crew members were hanged simultaneously, the largest group execution recorded at sea or on land during that period. Psychological impact on pirate folklore. The looming threat of capture eroded the once romantic allure of piracy. Even formidable pirates like Charles Vane and Calico Jack saw their own bodies left as warnings, stiff in cages near busy ports. Pirate trials and their accompanying published last words became bestsellers, the very voices of the condemned feeding legend while reinforcing deterrence. As the number of high-profile busts mounted, potential recruits and lower-level pirates found fewer havens and more hangings waiting in their future. Summary Blackbeard was slain in a violent confrontation, head displayed as a warning. Bartholomew Roberts died in battle. 272 crew were captured and 52 executed in one mass hanging. William Fly was last executed pirate captain of the era, his gibbet display marking fading romance and rising repression. These high-profile captures and executions weren't isolated incidents, they were orchestrated. Symbolic, efficient displays of government authority. Pirate leaders had become too dangerous, too influential, and their demise shattered confidence across pirate networks. With naval forces expanding, legal structures disciplined, and pirate havens in ruins, the capture and punishment of pirate captains became the decisive instruments in dismantling the Golden Age. Public perception shift. From around 1715 onward, colonial authorities and the British public began a concerted campaign to recast pirates, not as anti-heroes of libertine rebellion, but as existential threats to commerce, society, and empire. This shift was driven by law enforcement, propaganda, newspapers, sermons, and literature, and it dramatically altered how pirates were perceived both locally and across the Atlantic. Early in the century, pirate crews still enjoyed pockets of support, especially in Caribbean port towns where local economies benefited from pirate trade. The historian Eric Hobsbawm described pirates as social bandits, seen by many as Robin Hood-like figures resisting oppressive colonial elites. This positive or ambivalent perception began eroding as imperial power consolidated and colonial governors shifted policy. One catalyst was the 1717 Proclamation for Suppression of Pirates, widely disseminated in gazettes like the London Gazette. It offered pardons to pirates who surrendered by early 1718 and publicly listed those who did so, like Hornigold and Nichols, helping to normalize participation in state authority over piracy. Newspapers reprinted these proclamations repeatedly, sensitizing merchants and the public to the view that piracy was no longer tolerable entertainment, but a scourge on trade and law and order. Simultaneously, colonial and metropolitan officials leaned into moral rhetoric. Pirates transformed in the public imagination from clever rogues to monstrous outlaws. In printed discourse, the pirate became hostis humani, generis, the enemy of all mankind, embodying lawlessness and threatening the very foundations of society and global commerce. Public trials and executions served as both deterrent and narrative touchpoint. Accounts of pirate trials often included their final speeches and were published as pamphlets that sold extensively among colonists and London readers alike. The executions themselves were staged as public spectacles, gallows lining docks, heads on spikes, to terrifying effect. In these narratives, pirates were no longer exotic adventurers. They were cautionary tales to illustrate the fate of those who defied authority. Adding cultural weight was a general history of the pirates, attributed to Captain Charles Johnson. Though often criticized as exaggerated or fictionalized, it shaped the enduring mythology of pirates. By mythologizing famous figures Blackbeard, Bartholomew Roberts, and Bonnet, it helped entrench the dark romantic archetype of pirate life, just as the real Golden Age was fading into history. Thus, by the 1720s, piracy perceptively shifted from something almost socially tolerated in frontier colonies to a singularly vilified crime. Pirate suppression became a state policy. Pirates were recast in public perception from reflections of resistance and freedom to symbols of chaos, greed and moral decay, legacy and myth. As the real Golden Age of piracy faded by the 1730s, a metamorphosis began. The brutal reality of piracy, hangings, drownings, disease gave way to a mythic underworld of swashbuckling adventure, democratic camaraderie, and romantic rebellion. The relics and remnants of that era fueled an imaginative explosion in literature, theater, film, and tourism. What was once a deadly trade evolved into a cultural phenomenon, embedding itself in modern imagination, politics, and even identity. From fact to folklore, the transformation began almost immediately. In 1724, a general history of the pirates, attributed to Captain Charles Johnson, gripped public attention. It spun thrilling tales of Blackbeard, Anne Bonny, and Calico Jack, blurring truth and fiction. Its popularity shaped the archetypal image of the pirate black flag. Buried treasure, cutlass-wielding rogues solidifying what we recognize today. Subsequent literary works like Stevenson's Treasure Island and Barrie's Peter Pan reinforced these tropes, casting pirates as mermaids singing riddles of the sea. The silver screen and beyond. In the 20th and 21st centuries, pirate mythology soared. Disney's Treasure Island, the Pirates of the Caribbean films, even sporting teams like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers tapped this romantic reservoir. These portrayals rarely dwell on scurvy, mutiny, or keelhauling, but rather swashbuckling daring, treasure maps, and anti-authoritarian bravado. The public embraced the idea of pirates as freedom seekers, outlaws with a code, and that enduring image remains potent centuries later. Pirates as political symbols. Beyond entertainment, pirate mythology galvanized social and political movements. The 1724 general history and its depiction of democratic pirate societies inspired anarchist and radical thinkers. The fictional utopia Libertalia, allegedly in Madagascar, represented egalitarian rebellion against empire, resonating with later anti-capitalist and libertarian ideologies. Scholars note that pirate governance, a crew with equal votes, articles regulating behavior, compensation for injuries, mirrors early experiments in self-governance and communal economics. Cultural legacy and global influence. Pirate motifs endure across cultures, from Caribbean festivals celebrating hair, to tattoos, memes, cosplay, and even corporate mascots. The romantic pirate aesthetic, eye patches, tricorn hats, parrots, treasure chests is instantly recognizable worldwide. That image helped fuel tourism economies in former pirate hubs like Nassau, Tortuga, and Madagascar. It's also a metaphor, walking the plank in tough choices, sharing the booty in profits, or mutiny in tech boardrooms. Moreover, pirate mythology continues to shape scholarship, art, and media. New books like Pirates of the Golden Age, History, Myth, and Cultural Legacy examine the duality of factual violence and symbolic myth-making. Scholars debate, were pirates proto-capitalists, rebels against authority, or reflections of colonial systems? The answer remains multifaceted and reflective of our own values. Why pirates still captivate freedom versus authority? Pirates embodied rebellion, egalitarianism, multiculturalism, a sharp contrast to the rigid monarchic societies of their time. Democracy on the high seas, pirate codes functioned as contract governance captains elected. Spoils shared. Injuries compensated shocking structures for 18th century norms. Narrative gold. Sea battles, buried treasure, outcasts, forming societies. It's rich, cinematic material, perfect for bedtime stories or blockbuster franchises. Flexible potency. Pirate myths have been reinterpreted from capitalist rebels to social bandits, from corporate masks to queer black radical icons, adaptable to various social and academic agendas. Summary. The brutal end of pirate life morphed into legendary fiction through Johnson's general history, Stevenson, and Disney-style romances. Pirate aesthetics pervade modern culture, from teen names to tourism, tattoos, and entertainment cementing their symbolic power. Their political and organizational model inspired notions of democracy, labor equity, and communal living resonating with radicals, activists, and scholars. Their myth remains alive, a symbol of defiance, freedom, and rebellion, a mirror to our collective fascination with the liminal between lawfulness and liberty. As the dawn of the 18th century broke, the golden age of piracy reached its definitive close. What had once been a world where outlaw captains carved out autonomous realms on the waves, threw flash blades and stolen, treasure became untenable in the face of rising imperial power and global order. European navies, emboldened by treaties like Utrecht and backed by burgeoning anti-piracy laws, transformed from reactive to relentless hunters. Britain alone expanded its fleet from a few dozen ships in the 1670s to over 120 by the late 1710 ships dispatched not to fight rival states, but to eradicate pirate havens and restore maritime dominance. Simultaneously, colonial governors issued proclamations of pardon, most notably the 1718 Act of Grace, offering pirates a final choice: surrender and reintegrate, or continue as outlaws at certain cost. Without safe harbors like Nassau, Port Royal, or Madagascar, pirate networks unraveled. Their democratic codes and articles of agreement, once tools of self-governance, became relics in courts of vice admiralty and naval tribunals. Captured captains like Blackbeard, Bartholomew Roberts, and William Fly were swiftly executed, many publicly hanged or gibbeted, their deaths staged as deterrents to any who fancied picking up the black flag. By the mid-1720s, pirate crews had dwindled from thousands to mere hundreds. Their demise was not merely physical. Colonial authorities recast public perception through newspapers, trial pamphlets, and public sermons. Pirates, once tolerated in frontier ports, became the epitome of lawlessness monsters against trade, morality, and empire. Yet, while their reign faded, their legend endured. Captain Charles Johnson's A General History of the Pirates canonized them. as anti-heroes, democratic outlaws of the sea, and define the archetypal pirate for centuries to come. From Stevenson's Treasure Island to Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean, the myth of the pirate blossomed, overshadowing the stench of scurvy and the sting of the cat-o'-nine-tails. In closing, the decline of piracy was neither sudden nor straightforward. It unfolded across a landscape of war-ended surpluses, legal crackdown, naval enforcement, economic hardship, and ideological shifts. Yet this transition fashioned the modern maritime world, a world governed by commerce, codes, and collective security. The pirate faded, but the pirate brutal, democratic, rebellious was immortalized. As the age of sail gave way to empire and order, the legend grew ever larger, noisy, romantic, terrifying, and endlessly captivating.